Welcome on behalf of me, Robin, to attend events from Vacancy to Vibrancy. We're here today to explore two of my favourite things. Underused space, how can we make it really vibrant and economically productive and socially inclusive? How do we meet that challenge? And secondly, how do we do that in a seaside town? That's why I'm particularly interested, and also very relevant to be here in Weston-Super-Mare. Meanwhile Space operates a number of mixed affordable workspaces. We've got We Are Super just down there. Really keen to find out how we can support different places, including in-town shopping centres. I don't think we're here today to talk about out-of-town shopping centres, but particularly in-town shopping centres, meet that challenge. And I think here's a particularly good example of how that challenge is being met, how by bringing alternative uses into a space that was originally purely retail with an F&B offering, and we get different uses in different corners of the community to make the space inclusive and attractive, economically productive, and really contributing to the social fabric of that town. I'll leave my panel to debate all that. It's chaired by my colleague Emily, who I'll hand over to now. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to do the on and off again of classes these days and the evenings, so bear with me. So my name is Emily Berwyn, co-director of Meanwhile Space with Eddie, and this is a very interesting topic, as Eddie said, because this very much Meanwhile Space is to think about unused spaces and where they sit within the urban environment and how to make them work harder for local people. We all know that town centres and high streets are experiencing significant change, and how they adapt and evolve, continue to provide that support and space for local people is very important. We've got some very interesting people for you here this evening to talk to you about their experiences of town centres and underused and vacancy and reuse, particularly with shopping centre focus. So we have Susie Windvalley, Andy Mystery from Inner Circle, we have Kelly White from Montague Evans, and we have Councillor Canford from North London Council. And I'd like to ask them just to then a bit about themselves and what their experience is of vacancy and to use an interest in that in shopping centres. So Susie, would you like to have a minute or two?
Sure. Hi everybody, great to be here. So I'm Susie Weston-Super-Mare, I'm director at Turnerworks. We're primarily architects, and we've got really big interest in placemaking and in reusing spaces that are otherwise not giving anything back to the community. So our mission is to really help communities thrive. Here in Weston-Super-Mare, back in around 2020 to 2021, we were involved in a placemaking strategy working really closely with Weston-Super-Mare Council and lots of artists and other designers within the team to work really closely with lots of people, residents and business owners, to look at how you could really regenerate the town from the ground up. So by doing a series of small, medium and long-term projects. So that all came together to make a placemaking strategy, and one of those projects is here at the Sovereign Centre at the We Are Super Studios. Closer, better? Thank you. So great to be here tonight and to look at the outcome of some of those projects.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here. Great to be here. Thanks for hosting. A bit about myself. So I work for Inner Circle Consulting. We are primarily built environment and transformation consultancy focused largely on the public sector. So we work hand in hand in partnership with local authorities across the country on two main things: enabling better outcomes through placement, and enabling better outcomes through how local authorities deliver services. We came to work in Weston-Super-Mare because we developed the early business case and through the Turnerworks on these spaces. The cafe space here, the workspace, and the cycle unit, former cycle unit across the hallway there. And continue to work with North Somerset Council on some of their key assets, including Tropicana, assets around the town center. What drives me and what drives a lot of what we do as an organization is trying to put local authorities in the best financial position possible, but the best, or rather looking at assets that they own as tools, as levers to create better outcomes. And so there are a number of financial pressures local authorities are facing. How can they use some of the space they have for greater inclusivity, greater community access, and enhancing opportunities for starting a small business, reaching out to communities that traditionally aren't a part of the startup scene or are engaged in starting a small business, or they may operate something out of their home and are just looking for taking that next step. So a lot of what I do is focusing on how can we get people being great productive members of their community, and at the same time, what's the policy and the strategy behind all that to make sure that the council is the best position to do it. That's maybe too long.
That's
Sorry.
right. Thank you. Kevin?
Good evening, I'm Kevin White, I'm London Bonds Games. We're in property practice with council since 2017. I lead our town centre consultancy, and that's good about 100 people that's getting studies as for town centre files within the base. Really important to make towns function well, and a big part of most town centres around the country is a shopping centre like this. I'm particularly interested, I think, in how the interaction between place, built environment, and public and private sector can really help change the place. And particularly through ownership of shopping centres by council, you can change that narrative and the traditional input place in place to something much more outwards that thinks about its role by the town centre.
Thank you very much. Probably don't need a great deal of introduction. I'm the executive member at North Somerset Council for placemaking, economy and planning. But within my roles, I'm also given shopping centres and any difficult projects that people probably grasped over the last few years. The thing about placemaking, and I've had this challenge over and over again, is people don't yet quite understand what it really means and what it entails and what we're trying to achieve. And I think, you know, the partners we see around this room, there is no doubt at all that they get it. They get the fact that we are trying to create a better town centre with our partners. We can't do that in the council on our own. We don't have those skills. We can't afford those skills in the town hall today. I've been retailing since 1984 in Western High Street. And many of you will be aware that I left the High Street in 2019. I still retail, so it's in my blood, and I love it. There's no doubt about it. And places like the shopping centre, I have a huge amount of passion for, because I think it doesn't just create shopping space; it creates opportunity for people as well. And we have to use places like this and other sites in the town centre to drive those opportunities for people and the next generation of retailers and business people into our community, because without them, of course, our communities will stall, and that is simply not an acceptable position to be in.
I'm actually going to come back to you, but we've got a bit of a passing back and forward on the microphone. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to just crack on, but I'm also going to go out for questions at some point as well. So maybe be thinking about if there's anything important that we're not discussing that you would like us to do. I will come back out to you. So Mark, just going back to you, we're at the end of 2024, pretty much 5 years post-COVID now. What is the role of town centres these days? Are shopping centres still important? Are they still needed, in your opinion?
Yeah, I personally believe that town centres have a greater role in the community today, even it did 5 years ago. And that's because we now live in a society which is quite remote from the town centres, and they tend to live their lives online in some way or another. And I think it's highly important to have that attractive feel in the middle of your town where the community meets. And I think that's exactly how town centres and high streets have changed. I think there's no doubt at all now that we we're not just coming to town for shopping. That is just one of the elements you come to a town centre for, and not the only element. When I was a boy, you came to the town centre to shop. That was it. However, that's now changed and has to change because we can shop in so many locations now. So we've got to offer shopping, we've got to offer entertainment, we've got to offer hospitality. All those things have to be in our town centre. And added with that, and the work that I really supported in the meanwhile space in the Sovereign here is and Super Western is the fact is that if we can have people work back in the town. And the council are doing the same. The council are bringing their offices back into the town centre because they now understand the importance to have people working in town centres to help drive that economy. Town centres are more important now than they have ever been, and if we lose them, it's not just the shopping we lose, it's a community cohesion that we lose. And that's why we've got to work harder than ever to try and prevent that from happening.
Thank you. Kevin? In the face of that shopping centre, retail diminishing, do you think that there will be some kind of retail revival, or should shopping centres be focusing more on what I was talking about that sense of community and belonging to town centres?
It's probably two things, Sarah. First is that retail is actually coming back a little bit. There are green shoots of tenants starting to pay things like rents, which is quite high in the last couple of years. Which just sort of shows that retailers do that because we're changing our behaviours here. So we're convenience oriented beasts, but we're also socially oriented beasts. So the second point is that shopping centres are, to my argument, a really important place where people just get together. And shopping's really important, but also so is seeing people and getting out of the house. You look at not to be a young person now, but if you look at some of the trends amongst young people, they're the loneliest generation ever. And they're shying away from all that interactions in a way that there's much more food, I think, because we can still want to do. And they're looking for things that are human contact, and shopping centres are a key part of that retail centre.
Great, that's also actually don't know anymore, but well involved. They need to meet people when it's very hard for them these days, and they're not really well managed, which is a bit of a problem. Andrew, so just playing on this sort of slightly high level topic for a bit, what do you think the future of retail looks like? Should shopping centres be evolving into more mixed use developments, and what types of uses do you think could or should be prioritised in them?
And it's a great question. So I think you've got to start from the first principle, which folks have already recognized, which is shopping centers are probably just poorly named out. They're not necessarily for shopping. There's certainly a role for them. I see some of the best places in England, across the world, are those that have diversified their spaces. And so people aren't coming just to shop because we know that's not what people are solely looking for. They're looking for social engagement, but they're also looking for places to work for maybe a day or two or a few hours. They're also looking for different experiences. And so that's not necessarily, say VR rooms or podcasting spaces. But it can also be very community oriented stuff like yoga spaces or shared community kitchens. Different uses and different experiences that are drawing people in. I think one of the things that I would really love to see, to Councillor's point, is bringing in workspaces into a shopping center, because I think what that really brings is different energy, different degree of excitement, but also a different type of person that comes in every day or every few days, and is looking for a mixed experience. They might want to grab a coffee and perhaps do some shopping, but also catch a play or movie or access council service. And having a different, very diverse use in some of these buildings is going to make them long-term successful, but improve their popularity with the number of people and the types of people there.
I think there's also an argument for thinking more strategically as well about different types of services, like health and bringing those uses into a more central location for sure. Susie, can we go a little bit more granular and start thinking about the design interventions, so, and how can temporary specifically activation strategy, whether that's pop ups, cultural events, how can it be a stepping stone, do you think, to some of that longer term vibrancy and impact? Can you think of any examples of that?
I think the really interesting thing about shopping centres is that nearly every town's got one. So that's about 680 shopping centres across the UK. And half of those are in really poor condition. It's buildings that are really difficult and expensive to run. And so when we look at how you begin to change them, that's what temporary often really helpful. So temporary projects to try things out, to see longer term projects and to see if things are working. The other place that temporary projects comes in is if you're trying to change a shopping centre for the long term. They take up a really big part of the town often. And so if you're trying to shut part of it down, it can really change the routes across town and the whole nature of the town itself. So temporary projects can be really helpful to help get from kind of one part of the town to another, and that's maybe shopping centres being decommissioned. So we can see some great temporary projects here, from little activations, like you can see in the background, that's a Waterwood Shopping Centre. People coming in for evening time use, it being used for Christmas and events and so on, but also longer term activations where the We Are Super Studios are opening there and bringing kind of workplace into it. So some great examples, one of my favourite examples, is St Nicholas's Shopping Centre in Sutton, in Surrey, where a local dance school has taken over what used to be the Mothercare store, and they've done a really cheap fitness out there to do the absolute minimum. But what they've done is to build up an absolutely fantastic dance school and community arrangement, and a whole way of using the shopping centre at different times as well. So I think projects like that can be really, really powerful. What happens then is that an identity comes to that shopping centre that wasn't there before, opens up to a whole new group of people. So I think bringing culture into shopping centres and things like health as well, diagnostics and so on, are two really strong ways of reusing shopping centres, making them a viable part of the community.
Thank you. And then thinking about specific design intervention, I suppose, if you're trying to manage that change, are there any specific quick wins that we can make that from the design and intervention basis that would really start to encourage foot traffic or social interactions or community engagement? Can you think of any?
Sure. So with shopping centres, the first thing is the entrance. How do you get in there? We often find with shopping centres that they've built up over time, they've taken up a lot of the town centre, and actually some of the ways in can be really tricky. So making it really clear how you get into the shopping centre and how you get out again. Sometimes bringing more sky into the shopping centre and they've got really leaky roofs. Why not actually use that, cut a hole in it, let the sky come in so that you can orientate yourself to where you are. Then kind of pulling people together. You'll often find in shopping centres that are big, wide circulation spaces, and there's often kind of squares and grids within those. So to make more of those spaces, to make them clearer and more legible. A lot of the time, the shopping centre is a very, very big building. So to do this on a budget is what is very, very difficult. So we're using a very simple graphic language. You can see here with these OSB boards material on the back. It's a really clear part of the palette of the projects that have happened in here, which helps make those projects distinct. And it's also quite cheap to do. The cost of doing these projects, I think, can't be underestimated. And I think that bringing funding in to enable community projects in shopping centres to happen is one of the big challenges, I'm sure.
Yeah, we can touch on that for sure. Right, Kevin. So beyond retail, what activities or services do you think have been most successful in drawing people into shopping centres? And what is the experience like for these people who are involved in those different types of activities? Does it work for them?
So Susie starts talking about this really. Where there are some real successes is either when there's community uses that are making sense, and often that's from education. Things like to the middle of dance schools across the country, things like that, they're really positive. They bring families in, there's a reason to dwell, there's a reason and therefore to interact and hopefully buy some things, which is the main drive for shopping spaces. The other thing that's really important is health in the high street. So once you guys most of you have been to the average hospital, that their state's economy, one of the ways in the chest bring diagnostics and things onto the high street. There are several good examples now of that collaboration between NHS trusts and between councils and other shopping centre owners. And again, that's good another reason to come to town. So Council Canada talks in his opening statements about reasons to come to town, not just shopping. And things like schools is really important. And then just a bit of fun. So that might be a climbing wall, it might be, it might be a workspace, but just some other reasons to come. That gives people a reason to dwell. That's one big thing that's important. There's a reason to meet, a reason to dwell, and the output of that is there is a space for you.
Yeah, fun things. I always wanted to climbing wall, and anyone said that they're too risky. Okay, so I suppose the question around partnerships, which you talked about and sort of touched on a little bit, of how you might make some of these different activities happen is important. And what role do you play in activating vacant spaces within shopping centres? And which ones do you think have been most valuable and why?
So health just works. It works because it solves a number of different problems. It gives people a reason to come. It gives some interest in environment, so you can spend really positive. Workspace work really well. So usually raised some central setting. That same town also has a really interesting workspace that's several times exciting. It's taken over an old department store. It's got a yoga studio. It's got workspaces. It's proved really popular, particularly younger people that are working from home. And that's not been some vibrancy. The partnership aspects of need to just work together. So it's a really lazy assumption to say the council is to fix it. They can't fix everything. They've got a lot of other things to do. It's actually about getting different populations to work together to help this thing happen. That's about engagement into groups, it's about engagement educational establishments. And actually it's about education, so to help people understand the opportunities to start a business or to run a business that happens to be in a thing that used to be called a shopping centre, but can have really positive outcomes for individuals and the whole population.
I think I can come to you, Mark, now and talk a little bit about North Somerset's ownership of the centre and what that means for being able to bring different activities into the space and have more of that partnership approach, and be able to think longer term about what its role is for sure. Are there other benefits that this brings, and also what are the challenges?
Thank you. There's quite a lot there, and I think, a lot of that leads on to what Kevin was saying. One of the challenges we have as a council and many people who are resident in Somerset, we got two things now. We've got great partnerships with cultural organisations here in Somerset, which is absolutely fantastic. But what happens, we'll try something, and I can name two things quickly. It was a piano and then the table tennis. And because people become more interested in the shopping centre, then someone wants to rent the space. And that creates its own challenges, but that's, in a sense, that's a good challenge for us to try and deal with. Many will know that the shopping centre has been challenging in terms of what it was, why we bought it. But the reality is, since 2019, when we started working, we quickly realised, and the council has quickly realised, the centre here is more about the placemaking of Weston-Super-Mare centre, and not simply a place to come shopping. It affects what goes on throughout the high street. There is no doubt about that at all. And I think that's the opportunity that we have, the opportunity that North Somerset has. It can curate the direction of travel in the town centre. It can help produce a much better, much more vibrant environment, and it has a stake the taxpayer and residents have a stake in the shopping centre, and that gets some support, that certainly gets some traction. I know that, I know people are very fond of the centre, and there's no doubt about that. When we discussed at the beginning, because it was called the shopping centre, and we wanted to change the name, the amount of people who got engaged in that is phenomenal. Simply because they didn't want to see the name Sovereign removed, because they had an idea it was connected to the Queen at the time, which was incorrect, but all the same. It just goes to show that connection that residents have in a good shopping centre. Well, lucky because we've got a good one. I think the panel would actually agree. North Somerset's stewardship and the partners that they use to do that for us and on our behalf and on residents' behalf, we have got a good shopping centre, one which isn't likely to fall down. I'm sure it needs more investment, but it's not going to fall down. So in terms of the opportunities, we do have to fill the space. We do challenge Kevin and his team, and Savas and their team to make sure we're trying new things all the time, bring back things to us all the time. And also we're looking for them to help curate that placemaking thing in the town centre as well, because we need to become the town centre. And just to assure, panel members and the public, we do talk to the NHS. We are trying to encourage the NHS into our town centre. That they want to go elsewhere sometimes because land's cheaper or it's an easier opportunity. But we do need them in the town centre, and where we do have them, it does certainly have a very, very positive effect. So we've got to keep driving on that type of mixed use. And in terms of the opportunities around cultural mix, yes, we've got to keep looking at, and we've got to keep challenging ourselves to try and get groups in who want to do stuff. We had the art gallery, it was great, it worked really well. And I believe it sold a lot of pictures from it, especially I think the college did the whole display down there. And those are the sort of things we should be doing with our empty space all the time, and not just some of the time. And that's something that we keep pushing along, and I want to make sure we do.
I'm just going to stay with you, Mark, if that's okay, just for a minute. So the council only shopping centre means that you've got some control and power and say over what happens, and you can do that curation that you're talking about. But where a shopping centre or much of the commercial space in a town centre is owned by private landlords, how can other local authorities perhaps work to rethink the vacancies and underuse? Is there a mechanism they can do to do that?
Yeah, that's challenging. And again, where Weston-Super-Mare would be lucky, we were granted the money to help do up shop fronts. And so there's a combination of things that we've done. One is where we've encouraged landlords to renovate their shop fronts with a grant. They contribute 30%, we paid 70%. But the benefit of that, of course, is all of those premises that have done that are now let with regards to, I think, one, which has recently become empty. But it just goes to show if we can encourage landlords to do the same thing and landlords to take that remit. And I know one landlord in the town centre now who is thinking of doing just that, use the plans that were put in place initially and do the whole spend himself. It will have that positive effect. So there are things we can do. Grant funding is essential, there's no doubt. But it's proving to the landlords that if we do those things, then they will let their properties. And we've got to do the same thing here in our centres. We've got to make sure they're clean, they're tidy, they're bright, they're enjoyable, the mix is right. And if we do, we'll let the property. And I think that, in fairness, is beginning to show. It's taken a long time because we've been in a very difficult retail environment for some time. But the other things are beginning to come through.
Thank you. So, grant funding is super important to reduce the risk, is essentially what you're saying. If you can demonstrate the value and the benefit, then people will follow in that way. But you need the public money to be able to demonstrate that. Andrew, I'm going to come to you for one question, and then I'm going to see if anybody has a question from the audience. This is mainly about accessibility and inclusivity, and how do we what strategies can we put in place to ensure that shopping centres remain accessible and inclusive, even if they're bringing in all these different place activities, and how they can serve a broader range of community needs?
It's a great question. It's something I think about often, particularly in the line of work that I do. How do you how can you really support communities if space is just or practically useless? And so the number of strategies landlords and authorities can take, there's also some key principles that must be in place. I think one of the things that I always like to start from is how do people feel about a space? What's the data? What kind of data do you have? So it's often very helpful to start by asking the community, how do they feel when they come somewhere? What's their journey like? Do they walk there? Are they taking the bus? Are they taking the train? When they get off, what do they look for? Are there simple practical things like signage, wayfinding? If you're looking for a place to sit, is it clear that it's the space for me? And I think people have to feel welcome in space. One of the key ways to do that is making sure there's ample seating and that it doesn't seem like you have to pay for it. And the other key principle is making sure that things are legible, very clear. In some communities, having signs in different languages can often help. But also signs can be universal. And so we always don't need to rely on language to convey where something is or how to get somewhere. I think the other key thing is making sure that it's, and it's quite practical, quite silly, but quite bright. And is it clear? Is it large enough? In where I live, the signs actually are quite small and they feel a bit useless, or they're covered by trees and shrubs, and it's hard to find out actually where it's supposed to go. And this is very practical stuff of making sure that can I see it? Can I see it clearly? Can I see it from a distance? Gives comfort when you're coming to a place that's new. You can navigate, you know how to get around. That safety in navigating the place does wonders for people's ability to return, their interest in staying for a while and feeling comfortable in, well, and to Kevin's point, comfortable in a place to spend money or just enjoy the space, enjoy the presence of their families. So.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very much about confidence as well, isn't it? And feeling welcome and wanted there. It's a huge amount to do with if you want to be there in return. Does anybody have any questions? Wonderful. Do you want to say it and then I'll repeat it so that whoever, we've got a few people online, they can hear.
Yeah. So you've mentioned obviously different uses on the high street of our towns, for workspaces. There was a little mention of dance, schools and things like that. So what about the arts? There was very little mention of the arts, and then you touched on kind of cheap exhibitions like what we've got in here. What part do you think the arts can play within the town centres? How can we improve the kind of access to that within towns?
So the question was around what is the value of arts and culture in the town centre and how can we improve access to using it and accessing it, but how does those uses become more visible? Yeah, okay, perfect. Kevin, would you like to ask a question?
Try. It wasn't an accident over second being asked. I mean, it's a really big role. We've got a few interventions around here. So Western Architecture, for example, it's been announced a couple of times. The gallery space, and it is really important. For a number of reasons, really. One is the football driving, obviously the most commercial. One is the football driving aspect of it, and two is the excitement of the job, something new, something interesting. I think part of the question was perhaps alluding to how might arguments have access it possibly, interpretation. But I think we could do better at making it clear about where space to find available for some purposes to engage those communities. I mean, one of the particularly tough things that's been a lot of behavioural change over the last 10 years for owning spaces like this has been the old days you'd get an agent who would go and find you a retailer who would let a shop. They're in a very different world now where most tenants and suppliers buying commercial spaces and stuff. Actually going back in time a little bit and saying what the high street's like, for simplicity, much less retail focused. They're much more about different uses that can serve different purposes. I mean, living examples of decent art being used in places, I think it's about accessing the communities, and that's the level going for some ideas welcome.
I think it's a really great question. So I, as a kid, never went to an art gallery, didn't go to an art Weston-Super-Mare. And I think that shopping centres have got the absolute potential to get people into culture that they otherwise wouldn't find, otherwise wouldn't step out of their way to go to. There's a really great project in the West End in Croydon, which is run by a company called Turf Projects, they're a charity. And what's really great there is that they've got art that you can see, but also art that you can do. And I think combining those two things together is great. And it means that there's parts of the shopping centre that otherwise wouldn't be accessible, that is really pulling new people in. And it's also giving people potential to get involved in arts and culture that otherwise wouldn't be involved.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm also going to ask you about how you, in addition to whatever you're doing there, which I think it's great, I really would like your view on how you might bring property colleagues along the journey of seeing the value that is beyond financial of different kinds of pieces, particular arts.
To answer your question, I think there's two key things that stand out. One is, I think it's incumbent on everyone in the ecosystem to think of creative uses for spaces that don't seem like they're just viable. A great example is smaller spaces that maybe don't have any window access, or spaces in lower grounds or basements. Those can also be photography studios or dark rooms, or they could be film production. There is other opportunities that could be explored within the arts and culture scene that I think landlords, owners, asset managers ought to think creatively about when it comes to a space that seems at first glance to be not particularly. The second point there is partnerships. So local authorities have a great opportunity, being the apex of that they are, of knowing what the arts and culture scene is like, what some of the needs are in the space, and brokering their relationship forward, suggesting to folks, so we know there's X group, they're looking for this kind of space. Is that something that could be accommodated here? I think having that ability to broker between the arts and culture industry and shopping centers is an enormous opportunity. One that I know North Somerset does well, but ought to be continuously tapped into. Sorry, then to your question, which was about
How to convince property colleagues.
The other great question, one that I think is tough to answer in a way. So what we often do with what I do in my line of work is develop business cases that make essentially the strategic and economic case for undertaking X, whether that be refurbishing a shopping center or developing a whole new business park or creating a whole new community. But how do you articulate some of these benefits in a way that is meaningful to investors? One of the things we found is quite useful is putting a pound amount to things like jobs, essentially new homes, what's the value of that, what's the receipt of some council tax that can come in for some of these new businesses. And so there is a point, I think, in converting social value and impact into accounting. And I think that helps investors see that there's more than just a commercial return. Actually, there's a wider community impact. Which is my second point around having a really clear community impact statement to identify, yes, there'll be ideally a commercial return that comes over X years, but there's a much bigger story here for our community, and investing in this one piece on put online. Three others, and I think we see that with the sovereign change here is also starting to affect the rest of the task. And making that case and that really strong area to invest in, I think helps talk, because there's always an important, I think, emotional component and around an investment, and articulating what that is, the impact to a community, to its local people, I think does wonders in trying to sell an opportunity.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And Mark, I would like, maybe if we think about the high street rental auction process that's about to come aboard, and whether there's a way that we can encourage the council, not just new businesses and people to try that out, but actually more of the cultural and art activation through that process. Do you think that's something that?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. I mean, I think one of the conversations we have a lot of at council is the benefit arts and the creatives are for community, for health, businesses, it's not, it's so many elements to the create. And one of the things we do have in North Somerset particularly, we do have it is recognised as a very strong cultural community. Becca and the other three authorities look at Western and North Somerset as a whole, and I'm quite impressed about the partners that have been built, the work that has been done. There's no doubt sometimes it's very challenging because there's a lot of challenge for space, and I think all authorities would like to better fund the arts far better. But there's partnerships between the NHS and the arts in Western, and we see that. I personally love the arts in the sense that I just love art, whether that's the town, whether it's the Western Walls projects. I think it just adds so much vibrancy to our town centres. I would encourage every town to do the same thing, because it just gives us something else to look at, something else to enjoy without the cost. Once it's there, it's there. And I think the artists that do those works are really doing our town a huge benefit to the wider economic world in that sense. The auctions I really am excited about, and I spoke in council a fortnight ago. The government have agreed to continue with the retail auctions, which will give a property that has been empty for 12 months in 24 months. It will give, I will say, shops in this area will be able to put up for auction, and the landlords will have to meet the EPC, and then we will negotiate the rents upward. So if someone thinks they can pay a bit more, it will just keep going until we get those rents in place. And then there'll be a negotiated period of time for them to start to try and run their businesses. And I think it's also the benefit, isn't it, is that we've got to use these spaces to incubate new businesses. We know that North Somerset partners with Mr. Angela, we're in the Hive to help businesses get all the backup they need. They can concentrate on what they're really good at. And we do have the backup to help them set up their VAT if they've got that sort of business, set up their accounts, do all of those things. So these things are here. We've just got to give people the opportunity to use that creative thought, that interest in business, that compass. We've got to give them the opportunity to do that. And I do think one of the things I've spoken about on occasions is we do have to look at our space, and we do have to make it a bit smaller where we can. And it's going back to the boom in the 40s, 50s, when retailers, whenever we have a bad retail period, it is followed by a very successful one. And the likes of Marks and Spencer's, Martin McCall's, all of these people started at a bad time, but they started small. We've got to create those small spaces so in the future they can grow into the things they need to be. I think the years of huge shops in our high streets are gone. And I think we'll have to look at how we can fund the way to subdivide everything we do and create the sort of anything between 500 and 2,500 square feet, because people don't want the 10,000 square foot units anymore. I don't know if that follows up throughout the country, but it certainly feels like it in North Somerset.
Thank you. I think there was another question.
Yeah, thanks. I run a retail consultancy business, so I tend to go right around the UK and around Europe with my work. So I tend to see a lot of shopping centres and a lot of town centres. And I came to Weston-Super-Mare about 34 years ago. I think this building had just opened about 3 months, and I think Fruits Causeway opened a few months later. And I saw Weston-Super-Mare is. So this question really Weston-Super-Mare specific compared to other towns is that as a seaside town, we've got sort of 180-degree customers around the town, whereas an average town has got 360-degree customers. So you're pulling customers in all directions. We've got the sea at one side, so we're only pulling customers from that side. There's people who live in North World, as an example, or Locking Castle, who have not been into the town centre for years. And whilst I absolutely agree with what you're doing and appreciate what you're doing, and I think it's the right way to go, how do we get those people in the outskirts that don't go into town now? Will what we do just make it central? People who are within walking distance of the town centre, or can we do something so exciting that it will get people from outside that do not come into the town centre at the moment?
Good question, thank you. So the question for those online is, Western being a seaside town has half the customers potentially in terms of 180 degrees rather than 360. And how do we think about activities and uses that might draw people in from wider towns and neighbourhoods rather than just Western specific? Do either of you two want to comment on that?
I think a really strong pull could be around health and well-being, because that is something that everybody has to engage with. And there's a really strong need for it. So by offering something completely different in the high street and the shopping centre, they're more likely to engage people when you've got something that actually they really have to do. Seems a bit unfair almost to force people in. But what we're trying to do is bring people together as a community to benefit them.
It's a great question because it's a heck of a challenge, right? One of the things that I found mind-blowing when we were doing the research and work for the business case was 5 million people visit Weston annually. We spent about 230 million in that year. Those are staggering numbers. The vast majority come to the beach. And so you've got a labor market basically on your doorstep. And part of the case for referring to these spaces was, can you draw in just a small amount of people that go to the beach but don't access anything else? You draw them in through this building and bring them to the wider town center. And I think that's an experiment that's still ongoing. But I think one of the things that helps are those big sort of showstopper events. You have to, I'm sure someone will remember the name of it was the North Sea oil rig that came. Yeah, the monster. I came for that, I came for my family here, it was excellent. But it brought people from all over the place around. And so I think big blockbuster things like that are a big pull, they're a big draw. I think they get the type of attention that you're looking for. And so I brought my family here, we had come back again because it was first time that my wife had been here, and it was a good opportunity to showcase it to the town. So I think things like that help. I think one of the things that we also explored for this building was putting on a market or festival on the roof, which, as anyone knows, which I certainly didn't, it's too windy up there. And there's a number of health safety and lawsuit issues that we get into. But I think thinking out of the box like that, what are really big, fun social things that you can develop that start bringing people from all over the place, and not just as the risk is will live in the immediate area.
You're back to unique cultural and arts office there with your big showstoppers. Questions that aren't being more space, I'll come to you guys in just 1 second. I think you had your hand up first. Yeah.
When you did the consultation stuff, I remember walking past the opposite unit and there was all these ideas that members of the community, particularly younger members of the community, had for what they like to see. I don't know what you then did with all of that. I may have missed follow-up stuff, but big things happen, big discussions happened, and then yes, we've seen We Are Super and we have seen a change here, but there were some really lovely ideas, and I don't know if it was communicated and I just missed it, and why some were chosen or some would never work. Because actually, I think people did have some ideas, but we didn't necessarily see that evolve.
Yeah, the question is what are the amazing engagement ideas and how were the next steps taken? Do you want to say that again?
So we undertook a big engagement process. We had 6 local artists work together with us on that. We pulled all that information together and then produced a placemaking strategy, which you can see online. That placemaking strategy has got loads of projects in it. Some of those projects are really short ones, some medium ones, some long-term ones, some are big, some are really small. The intention for Weston-Super Council has been to assess those and to choose which ones to roll out and then decide when that happens. So it's all there if you want to see it. As to whether they will definitely all happen and when exactly they will happen, that's so many different things because they also have different sources of funding and so on. for all the production of that work comes straight from the engagement. So you can see that from the prospectus as well. Would you like to pick up?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the Western wishes list effectively that came out of that. I can say we've achieved 4 out of the top 5. And we will be rolling out that market in the new year, which will be fantastic, because that was, I think, number 5 on the list. They wanted a town centre market. We're on to the Burnbeck Pier. You were not going to get the swimming pool in the Tropicana. I'm going to be blunt about that. It's not going to happen, and that was in there. But so that happened. I think the problem is, isn't it? It's because it's 5 years. It's spread over 5 years. Something happens, and we go, "That's great." And we forget where it came from. We forget it came because the public wanted it. You know, we've got a 10-pin, people wanted it. 10-pin bowling was in that top 5. And we got a 10-pin bowling alley now. Okay, it's private investment, but it's there. And so we have been achieving those. We are now getting ourselves into a position where we look at the placemaking strategy again, because, you know, once Tropicana is done, once the Burnbeck's done, we fix those bookends. We then got to start looking at how we make Weston-Super-Mare the place you want to be in. It's about planting the flower beds. It's about cleaning the streets. It's about making sure the litter's picked up, making sure the rubbish is out of the way first thing in the morning. And it's about those things. Placemaking is going to be more than just the ideas. Placemaking is going to be making the place in the future. And that's something we're working on now. And it's something the placemaking agency is working hard on. And we're beginning to put together groups how we can see that. And in terms of just quickly coming back, and it's a term about understanding that audience, understanding those customers. We've been woefully poor at reaching those customers, but we are really aware that if we can just pull people in from the motorway into Weston, we're looking at 100,000 people. Weston would be an incredibly successful town, and then you have to have these 5 million people passing the seafront. And if you could tap, what do you tap in marketing? 5%. We tap 5% of them as well. It would change. It would be a complete game changer. And we have those wayfinding projects within the LUF, the levelling up money. I know not back to call it now, government, UK government grants. And we're doing a bit of work around that. We're trying to understand, and what I've always been really keen on is how we draw the people through Spider Lane into Italian Gardens. And we just need to find the funding so we can pave Regent Street properly, all those things, so it becomes more attractive. So it does depend on the funding, but you know, we are very much aware of the issue that we have to drive forward on the place now, and not just the projects that needed to be fixed after 30 years of neglect.
Thanks, Mark. I suppose there's also a kind of community activation side of things as well. If anyone's thinking about doing anything, then coming back to that placemaking strategy and what people said they wanted to see happen is a really good place to start, as well as once the funding comes through. So I'm quite conscious of time. I reckon we've got time for 2 more questions. Yeah, I know that, but I know those guys, so I'd rather you guys as well as over there. So yes. Would you like to ask your question? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
All right, got a couple. But I understand what you're saying about bringing people in from outside. And I think that's really important. I'm going to concentrate on the people who live in this small community. And there is a lack of community facility in this small around Weston City Centre. So Weston Town Centre. So I appreciate the working that covers, that ticks a certain amount of people, but there are all those ages of communities that need somewhere to go. Mm-hmm. You know, there's the older members of the community, my own pensioners. There's mothers and toddlers. You know, we have small children centres, but this would be a good place for those people, and it all comes down to money, doesn't it? How do you and charities that need places to be. So how do we fund those? What sort of rents? How do you make rents accessible to those people that would like to come into the centre but can't afford the rents? And I'm very pleased to hear you say about the auction, because we know there are landlords on the high street who But people won't go into those properties because of the way the landlords behave. So the sooner we get them sorted out, then we're sorted out, then the better. I'm pleased to hear about that. But how can we get into the centre?
Yeah, okay, so how, for those users that perhaps can't pay but still bring value to the community, how do we make space for them, I suppose? Kevin, would you like to answer that question?
So difficult. So one of the reasons shopping centres have been successful in the past is because they're safe, they're warm, they're bright. All those things come at a cost. So when you open the door in any of the shops here, you instantly have to pay towards security, towards lighting, towards cleaning. And they're just costs that happen before you've thought about rents or business rates. So that creates an inherent challenge for shopping centres versus high streets. So then comes on to the question about where these uses are best put. And yes, they're needed in town. I think that becomes a question about where they go and where's the most appropriate place for them, because it may be that it's more cost effective to have, for example, the high street units that is very close to this, so they can access the warm safe space for shopping centres, but actually don't have to contribute to the cost, because they need to have somewhere. Whereas students saying that it's obviously it all comes down to cost. It's a challenge.
And can I just add, and it is about looking at where the placemaking of a centre, shopping centre, it works because it's about what's around it, because there's no doubt that people like me will be challenging Kevin to make sure we clear our books. And, you know, we already have some, so we have citizens bicycling, we know that that's a footfall driver, so that's good news. But the reality is, if Kevin came to me and said, we've got these 5 tenants who need to get into the shopping centre and they'll pay us £200,000 rent, I find, as a councillor, I find it extremely difficult to unbalance my books and then the other say, oh, I don't want the £200,000. So that is the challenge. So it's about using that space around, creating the place around the centre, and that's all about that placemaking and why we have benefit of owning the centre, because we can curate what's happening around it. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do in the centre, and cover those issues. And we do have some examples in the town where we do have community groups. Here next to you, for example.
I'd also encourage you to talk to Denise and Debbie about WeAreSuper, because there's lots of support for different types of groups that we're providing there. That put your hands up, maybe guys, like, yeah, there we go, just behind you. And lots of different kinds of access to space. So please do. I'm going to ask. Sorry.
And I just on one of those points, there are lots of community involvement. We do get charities, various groups want to use the space. Fabulous, we can often do it at a discounted rate. The biggest problem, and I was interested, you talked about down the schools and climbing walls, are they 9 to 5? Because one of the biggest problems for here is the 9 to 5 economy. It's the high street is 9 to 5, the sovereign is 5. So many groups are excluded because of those times. So yes, we can do, but we're prevented because of the time.
Yeah, the time is a huge issue.
Yeah, classes, that's been brought up a lot, you know, adults, math classes, which we can't put on, we'd love to. We can't, because obviously there's certain stocks up to a certain point, and we'd have to usher everyone out through a fire exit, it's just not appropriate. So, but there, and even then there'd be, you know, funding available, I believe, for that as well, which makes it even more annoying, because it would be nice to be able to provide it and be able to do that for people and put it on just as a funding capacity. We'd love to do it. It's a problem just with the times.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I just finish on that? It's the fact is you're quite right, and it's something I need to talk to teams about, because the more people that come into town centres in the evenings and use these facilities, the safer the town centre becomes, or the perception of safety becomes, because they are safe, let's be fair. But it gives that people feel much more comfortable to walk around town centres, and there are dozens and dozens of other people doing the same thing. So you're right, and I will take that away and talk about how we can look at ways of trying to extend that period. We worked really hard at extending the tourist season in Weston over the last 5 years. but we need to do it about the shopping centre, because walking in here tonight, 5 o'clock, so much was shut, and that's just disappointing 3 weeks before Christmas.
And having the ability to have the activities that David was talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
And put on groups that, you know, you might not be able to do that during the day.
Use the space.
Really want to.
Absolutely. I'm aware there's loads of people with questions, but I'm also really conscious of time. I'm going to ask this gentleman here for his question as the last one, and then encourage everybody to come and grab a drink and ask any further questions you have of the panel after that. Would you like to give me a question?
Yeah, I'd like to know the panel's thought on using the centre to highlight the independent areas that we have here just off of the centre in Orchard Meadows and Berwyn Village. How, you know, because currently at the moment there's any sort of identification of those, and they are very important independent areas, literally within a stone's throw from here. How do you see the central part of the assisting our independent areas?
Okay, who would like to answer that?
I'm gonna start.
Yep.
Because I want to be a little controversial, that's all.
Okay.
I think, well, thanks, good question. You know, I was in one of those independent areas for many years. Our town centres need to shrink. They need to shrink. The extremities on the edges of our towns where we have shops that are struggling to fill, they are where community spaces can be. They can be converted to the housing we need in our town centres. All of those things have to happen. But our retail space needs to shrink, because we have expanded through the 80s and 90s during retail booms, and we now need to pull it back to redo it. So what we need to do, and hopefully through the retail auctions, we need to bring some of those business, and we've got a perfect example in the centre here, where they were down the road from you, and it's been hugely successful bringing their toy shop into the centre. And we need to do more of that. And we need to get our high street really vibrant, and then that will simply spread out. It will spread out, it always does. I have real confidence in that, but it is about trying to encourage those people at the furthest ends of our town to start moving. So where they are, and it becomes much more vibrant, much greater footfall. And that's how we encourage those really good places like Meadow Street, like Grove Village. They're great locations, but we do need to pull people in. You know, so many places at Yemen Boulevard, for example, which are empty. We need them in the town.
I'll go for an opposite view. I think it's really good to have multiple centres, even in a small town. And I think that a shopping centre can block off the middle of the town. So it's really important to get the routes through working. Intermixing is part of that, to make sure that the whole nighttime economy, when we look at it, means that the shopping centre can be used as through routes. But those independent areas that are already established should also be kind of amplified and thought of as valuable as the whole place-like experience of the town as the big centres in the middle. So I think champion them, and these kind of temporary activations that we're talking about, and indeed things like pop-ups and culture, arts and culture and so on, could also really augment the local centres as well.
There's two things that come to my mind. One, I'm a very visual person, so I think what can help is maybe creating kind of visual districts where we're using color to delineate this is the arts and culture district, or this is the tourism district. I think using branding and visual identity creatively can help, one, demarcate what things are, maybe what their uses are, what they're supposed to do, but two, give people an opportunity to not rally around, but recognize, this area is doing this, and so I recognize and know what that means, and they can go explore that. So visual identity, I think, is a component to that. The other point I think that is quite important, and one that picks up on a few other things. You might realize that a consultant saying you should have a strategy for it, but strategies and policies for things like early evening economy, or a small business strategy, or neighborhood strategy. I think those things that the local authority owns, but does in consultation and in cooperation with partnership, those set out the sort of building blocks for getting to the point of having really clear, strong identities, but also having the council back up with meaningful policy, what the change that they'd like to see. And so if it's long opening hours, then that can be something that can be included in a policy, and then becomes formalized And then that gives a really strong, gives you some legs to stand up when you go out to business, say, you know, we know this is important, we've heard it from people, it's a part of our policy, we'd love to see you sign up for it. I don't want to put words in council's mouth, but I think strategies and policy are important tools in getting some of those things done.
Thank you. I'm going to finish with a quick fire question on the view. I'm going to start with you, Andrew, just because I'm facing that direction. What 3 ingredients do you think are key to successful reuse and adaptation of shopping centres going forward?
So I think I'm a bit of an architecture buff, so I think prioritizing either heritage, and it can be a short history of it, but heritage and its design features are actually an important component, and you either want to celebrate them or enhance them, or maybe not, but I think they're important. That's all. And then I think partnership working, but not partnership just in, institutional or inventors. I think partnership with communities and the chamber, with local groups, with different types of groups are key to understanding what people actually need and what they're looking for. And if you don't know what people are looking for, then I don't think you'll build something that answers what people want. And then I think, to reference what I've just said, I think local authorities need to be really strong, really clear on what their ambitions are, what the aspiration is, and then the strategy and policy behind it all to say, look, this is what we want for X space, this is what we want to achieve, here's how we will support achieving it, and these are the types of uses of it. I think setting that out really clearly is a key component of making it exist.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to ask you a different question, actually. I'm going to ask Mark the same question. If you've got 3 key ingredients that you think make these things work?
Yeah, I'll be quite quick on that. It is about understanding your audience. Making sure you reach them, wherever they are. You've just got to reach them. And the last one to me is making sure the businesses that do come here become sustainable, supported, and given every opportunity to succeed. Because trying to bring in new ones all the time is really difficult. So we've got to really grow what we already have.
Thank you. And Kevin, is there an activity or use that you would love to see in the centre that you've never seen before?
You hadn't did the last bit, and I said shop. I want to ignore the fact that that's a promotion of shopping centres and stuff.
Okay. Stevie?
I would really like to do kind of circular economy hub here. I think a really good one would be around fashion. So bringing people into the centre to be able to fix stuff, recycling some new things. I think it could really bring lots of people of different ages together. It can work on all sorts of different things. But yeah, I can see that being something that it would be super great in Super Western.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to answer this one as well because your lovely colleague Jasmine and I talked for hours about how shopping centres are brilliant for roller skating and roller skating evenings and roller and I think that would work amazingly. You've got amazing floors, you've put fun house and good music. It would be brilliant. Anyway, thank you so much. We've had some really excellent questions tonight. I'm sorry we haven't been able to answer them all, but please grab a drink just over here and carry on the conversation. And thank you so much, everybody, for coming.